Right, good evening, everyone. So, thanks, Hadir, for organizing all this. And it has taken quite some time, actually, to get here, in terms of, finding out what we're going to talk about. So, a special thanks for that. It is a pleasure to be here. My name is Missak Vehouni. I am the golden oldie of ATÖLYE. Probably the oldest member, but I'm looking for actually energy, in fact. And that's one of the reasons why I've also joined. It's be surrounded by younger generations, okay? So my background is actually in customer operations, human resources. Most of the time, I have managed part of bigger multinationals, actually, until about 15 years ago. And we're talking about future. Actually, my future started, I would say, about 15 years ago, when I shifted to much smaller organizations, startups. And in fact, I helped companies to put in cultures, take care of their people, but also restructuring and reorganizations of bigger ones, actually. And that's one of the reasons I'm here today, I suppose, is to talk a bit about culture, what is culture, and how you can make it happen, actually. What does it mean?
No, go ahead. Amazing. I'm really happy to be here. Thanks, everyone. A bit of a background about me. I also had a career switch. I think that you'll find that most people, or not most people, but many people in the people in culture or HR space have had some form of a career shift, and it's usually into this, which is out of a passion or a calling that they feel. So that happened to me as well. I started out my career in startups. I've only worked in startups other than the internship here or there when I was younger. I started out in the operations world, and then I shifted my focus from external people to internal people. I've worked in different industries, and now I'm at Sarwa, which is a Dubai-based startup in the fintech world. Before this, I was in New York, I was in Toronto, I was in the food tech industry. And I also, on the side, I freelance on the side, you can say, in terms of coaching, and also in some more artistic things. So I can try as much as possible to relate to all the people here. So yeah, it's a little bit about me, and I'm excited to talk more.
Awesome. Yeah, it does.
Oh, okay.
So why are you doing this? I'm so confused.
Put it off, you said.
No, when you're not using it, you can just turn it off, but it's fine.
Okay. My name is Randah Taher, and I'm very happy to be here with both of you and with all of you. My journey started like 25 years ago. My background is in creativity and innovation. That's my focus has always been that. It went from community organizations to nonprofits to leadership development. That was when I was still in Canada. I'm Canadian, and before coming here, my focus was on the different way of innovation and how can people think of ideas and then go through them. So 2009 was my shift at so many different levels, because I not only moved continents, but I also shifted sectors. I worked in many sectors, and this is when I came here and I was teaching at university. I was teaching architecture, engineering, which is why I say I know you, because I have former students here. I was teaching architecture engineering, and I was not an architect. It's not an engineer, and I'm very proud to say that, because I was teaching them how to think through the design process. Right? At that time, design thinking was not a word anyone used here, so I didn't use it, but the design process worked. And so that was my work for a few years before I shifted into consulting, and I went into consulting with governments, with different companies. It's always within the innovation. And I know, like from experience, that you don't teach innovation to people and then they go back to work and then they are just completely destroyed because the process is not helping them, the tools are not helping, nobody is listening to them. So the culture was the basis that I had to start with. And so if I needed to work on anything, I was like, what is the culture like? And that culture, there is a, if I can start already with the thing, there is a theory, a creativity theory called the 4 Ps. And that says, you know, if you want to be creative, you have a creative person, a creative process, a creative product or service, and then there is a creative press. And the press is the environment, and it encompasses everything, right? Because if you have a creative person in a non-creative process, they get frustrated. And if you have an amazing product and you don't have someone with a vision, you know, the person, then the product is lost. So the culture is where I have been working for the past 10 years as a culture designer and innovation facilitator. So just to give you an idea how we're going through this, like I said, we have 2 blocks of topics. The first one is for organizations and startups and how do they think about cultures. And we'll do that for 15 minutes, so like a conversation between us, and then we'll open for question and answer for 10 minutes. And then we'll go into the second block, which is for creative, majority view. And then we'll do the same thing. And then finally closing, no more questions. But I see a chatting like group of people, there will be a lot of questions, which is amazing. All right, so I'll start with a question. We won't take it in a negative way, we'll take it in a positive way, right? But that is a question we spoke about when we were preparing it. So what is a healthy compared to a toxic culture? Like, how do you know the difference?
Okay. Before getting into the toxic and the healthy one, I'm thinking what is coming to mind really is that and that's what I found out many years ago. Like it or not, wherever you go, there's a culture, right? And whichever company you go, there can be a designed culture or a culture by default. In fact, a lot of times you get in there, you don't know what is happening actually. And you know, the other thing is that you have a lot of times rules by design, written rules, but you also have unwritten rules, right, about culture. When we talk about culture, maybe an idea, just to start also is, if we would ask around, what is culture? Each one of you, I'm going to be almost sure, will have a different idea about what culture is. So just to have a bit of an alignment, I would say, is the way we do things around here. That's one way to look at culture. That's a very basic way to look at it. So when we think about that, especially in startups, what I have come across is that you start with like 2, 3, 4, 5 people, and then eventually it grows to 10, 15, 20, 25, etc. And then all of a sudden you realize, what happened? Where are we? And at certain stage, you realize, actually, we need to get some rules, some processes. And I'm not even thinking about now the very basic stuff. It's about how we behave around here. What is normal? I'll give you one very concrete example, is how we give feedback, right, in everyday life. When I started working, which was a very long time ago, we were lucky, we would get once a year a sort of official evaluation and a feedback session, right? And then everything was determined coming out. You might have worked the whole year, and just once a year was the norm, actually. Well, that has completely shifted, as we all know now. And what we say is that it has to be much more continuous. But what is even more important, I would say, is how you give feedback. And the way you do that will determine the culture, for example. This is just one small element of culture, but how you do that is what I would call the employee experiences on a daily basis, right? That is happening. That is going to be very key. So it is very important to have people that are aligned with the idea of giving feedback and the way you want to give feedback. Again, a very concrete way, maybe takeaway for you, is there are many, many ways of giving feedback, and I'll make it very practical now. And that is, have you heard of the sandwich feedback? Right? Positive, negative, positive, right? We always do that, okay? I've done it for over 20 years, and then even after 20 years, I was wondering, why isn't it working? That's what we were taught, okay? The way to do that is, and then what happens when you're doing positive, negative, positive is, if you're commending somebody because they have done a good job, what do you think is going in their mind? Oh, sugar. What have I done now? Right? Otherwise, why would he say something positive? Or she? Right? So, when that is happening, and then you know, so you have already completely closed, your brain has, right? And you're focusing on the negative. And therefore, what has happened? You have created already a culture, or almost, should I say, negativism, right? So, one way to overcome that is something actually I've learned only something like 7, 8 years ago, which is take away from the person. Or people tell you, don't take it personally. Okay, I'm giving you this feedback, but it's nothing to do with you personally. I mean, after all, you're telling me. So how can I not take it personally, right? So the way to do that is to take it away from the person, to talk much more about the impact that behavior has had, right? So if you describe, if there's a formula, SBIA, situation, behavior, impact, action. So if you describe the situation, you talk about the behavior, say that somebody has given presentation, which was okay, but not that great, okay? Rather than emphasizing the behavior, you talk about the impact that it had. So the impact that it had on the participants was that they were not so engaged. And therefore, it didn't create the kind of impact that you were looking for, is it? What can you do better next time? What's the action that you can take? So what you're doing is you're taking away from the personal aspect. It's much more important to talk about the impact, in fact, right? Now, why I'm sharing that is that it's something you can practice from now onwards, be it private, be it personal. I did it with my wife, it works perfect. And it's really, when you think about it, it's common sense. Now, why I'm spending some time on this is that it is really so central. In every dealing that you have with your people, you're creating culture. We are not really aware of it. We're not conscious about it. But actually, we are doing it. The way you say thank you, the way you say hello, the way you do that, that's what I'm emphasizing really, has a complete different meaning for the person than not. And that's what culture is. That's what we're doing on a daily basis. So it is about the human aspect, obviously, and how you go about it has a tremendous impact. And my job partly is to make people aware of what is happening around them, actually, and bring that awareness. A lot of times, people are not. Okay? We are in our machine. We don't take time out. In basketball, they do that, time out, right? And so, out of our busy lives, we don't. It's one way to do that. And that's how you can create a more healthy culture, I think, is to emphasize much more those small, everyday contacts, communications that are happening. That's one way to look at it. Toxic, obviously, is, I'll leave that maybe to say, that's not so. Go ahead.
Okay, let's start by talking about toxic cultures. Yeah, so it's good that you defined culture and what is culture, because that's something that is subjective to an extent, but to another extent, it's really the norms that you've developed in an organization or in a team, and what is normal, what is expected in terms of how you interact with other people in the team. It's how you interact with your clients. If you have clients, it's how you interact with external people that that are in the team. So that's one way of looking at culture. It's the norms that you've built. It's the behaviors that have been normalized, and it's what is expected of you as part of this collective. So that's, I guess, one very general way of looking at culture. If you're to define it into, let's say, healthy or not very healthy, I would say the what's at the root of it is a safe organization in terms of you have psychological safety. You have safety around expression. So within that, there is being able to express whether you agree or disagree with something that's being said internally. So is it healthy to have debates or discussions that maybe vary in your opinion, or do you have to follow a specific type of opinion or way of thinking? Another way of looking at it is feedback. As was discussed, are you able to give feedback and receive feedback, or are things a surprise? Do you come into a performance review, for example, and you're completely shocked at what is being shared with you, or have you been given feedback over time? Have you been given opportunities to improve and grow? And that's one way of looking at it. I think is really in terms of safety, and safety to be yourself as well in an organization. So to me, that's at the real core of a healthy culture. The rest is nice to build onto that foundation. So by nature, a non-healthy or a toxic culture is the opposite of that. And I'm sure you've heard stories, or maybe you've experienced a toxic culture where you didn't feel comfortable at work, whether that meant to share your opinion, whether that meant to make mistakes, whether that meant to take a sick day, take vacation. It's really just the opposite of something that is healthy to your well-being. If it's harmful to your well-being, there are so many examples. The list goes on and on. But yeah, that's what I would say is really at the core. This feeling included and feeling safe.
Like that. Thank you. So I want to add to that. So not only feeling safe and bringing this to your awareness, I think the problem with culture is very intangible. You cannot put a KPI on it. You cannot touch it. You cannot say this is a degree of healthiness or not. It is really the way that people behave with each other, and it's the way that they show up at work, whether it's at work, physical or online or whatever it is. It's really hard to notice unless you pay attention to it. And by default, organizations have a main culture for the organization, but the bigger you become, the more like pocket cultures you will have. This department is fun. They have like lunch on Friday together, but this department is very harsh because their manager keeps, holding them to the minute. What time did they arrive? What time did they leave? And it's the same organization. And so what makes it, like, how can you build something that people are able to bring their whole selves in? So this is part of safety. Like, I am okay, not only I receive feedback as it is, I know that it is not layered, but I'm also okay sharing whatever that comes to my mind. I don't need to be afraid that someone will judge me or judge my ideas and, oh, where did this come from? Something like that, right? And all these like small like talk behind everyone else that adds to the culture, and all this little like, can I ask you to do it? And then you go and do it and you put your name on it. That's also part of the culture. Can we work together on it? And I trust that people do. And then we do, and we collaborate and we build it together. That's also part of the culture. So, and of course, am I comfortable coming the way that I want, or do I have to put on a different pace because the culture expects me to, right? Why are you dressed like that? And I have been in organizations that give you this, whether it is blunt in your face, we don't do that, we don't do this here, right? Or you just feel it. And so being aware is one of the hardest things to know. And it's even harder for, and we'll talk about it later, for creatives when you're joining something. How do you know this culture is good or not good? But can we share a few examples of what are small elements of the culture so that we become even more aware, that are so influential in the way that it affects your work? But then it is not very clear, it's not very visible unless you put your finger on it. Do you have examples?
She opens this, you open this, right? I think people want to jump in, but I had mentioned a few of the examples like tangibles, which is ongoing feedback. I think this is very important, and it's not just from a manager to an employee. I think it's also upwards, and I also think it's between each other. So regardless of what level you are, giving your peers feedback, being able to have an open dialogue with your team members in different projects, which is it's quite critical to be able to do that. So feedback would be one of them, ongoing and at all levels. Being able to tell your manager, you could have done a better job at this specifically, or you should have gone with a different technology or whatever it is, and being able to share your opinion. So I think feedback, ongoing feedback, and not just every 6 months, is quite important. An example.
Yeah, I'm wondering, is there something specific that you might, after what we have said now, is there something that is really burning matter, or that you're saying, go ahead?
Yes, that's right. So I totally agree with psychological safety and feedback are fundamental tenet of every culture. It seems to me that teaching people how to do feedback relatively intuitive, relatively. But what I'm interested in is from a cultural perspective, how do you establish a feedback culture? Because giving feedback in itself is currently concerning because of the fear of conflict, how it's taken, etc. Google paid a training company in 2014 $1 million to go, how do we establish this? Because we keep teaching people, we say do it, and people don't do it. So from a cultural perspective, how do you establish a feedback culture?
What I would say to that is that maybe a good place to start are nowadays we talk a lot about purpose, right, of organizations. And what I'm finding is that a lot of times purpose is not, people are not aware of what the purpose of the company is. I think that's a good place to start. I have done some work, for example, recently with a cleaning company. You would say, cleaning company? What kind of purpose can they come up with? We did it company-wide. It was amazing. What they came up with is much more about, we're making life easier for people, right? That gives it a totally different meaning for when people are coming to work than if they're talking about, we're here just to clean up, right? So I think a good place to start is defining that. And then after, the second step probably would be around values. So to establish some of your values and how they translate into behaviors. unless we are clear about them, and unless we talk a lot about integrity. I'll give you another concrete example. I work with Orange, the telecom company. One of the values of Orange still is, I'm not sure still is, but it was refreshing. Okay. Now, what I liked about that one is in meetings, for example, you would get somebody coming to present a new procedure that was like 40-page long, and this is how we're going to do things. And then somebody would say, what's so refreshing about this? Yeah. So it ended up with a 2-pager actually. So what I'm saying, I suppose, is that now in terms of, we're talking about how do we get people to feedback more, for example, right? And I think it's all linked in that if we can get this, I mean, there's no one solution, I would say, to a problem like feedback or psychological safety. I mean, how you create safety is quite a number of things. Trust. How do we establish trust? It's not one element that is going to deliver trust. So it's a number of different initiatives. We want to become innovative, right, as a company. Okay. CEO said, from now on, we have to become innovative, right? How do you do that? You can. That's what I'm saying about the difference between culture by default or design. You can become more innovative, of course. You can put in place practices. Okay, that's next steps. Once you have values, is what type of practices are you preaching and doing operationally? I mean, yes, the common wisdom is if the CEO or the senior guys are not doing what they preach, it's not going to help. I tend to agree. I can tell you after so many years in my practice is that you need senior management to be on board, right? And that's another key way. I mean, if they don't give feedback in the proper way, then how do you expect the middle manager to do a proper job? And that's why in startups, I think it's very important that the key people are very much aligned and therefore are talking the same language and also practicing the same behaviors. We're going to talk probably, I thought about, what is important these days in terms of what is it, how do you position yourself if you're going for interviews, for example? What is it attractive for you? So we're going to get to that. So the last thing I would say is we talk a lot about something that I've discovered also like 10 years ago, which was positive psychology. You might have heard of the term, I don't know. How many of you heard of positive psychology? Okay, great. Psychology essentially is about correcting, let's say, or helping people who are in need most of the time. The notion of positive psychology was made very popular by somebody called Martin Seligman, I thought. And he said, why not start with positiveness rather than taking what is negative? So why I'm talking about positive psychology is that let's look at our strengths. Have you noticed what strengths you have? Are you aware of what those strengths are? And are you putting them forward? Rather than focusing on weaknesses. Again, that's an old mindset, I would say. Okay? We talk about, nobody's saying you should ignore your weaknesses, be aware of them. But if you emphasize much more and you do something more about your strengths, that's going to help you much more. They are your strengths for a reason. Because you're talented in them, you can work with them, you know how to go about them. Now, if you put more effort on your strengths, they're going to become even stronger. Roger Federer hasn't become the star that he was or still is just because he had talent. He has worked like mad to get there. Blood, sweat, and tears. I've seen many stories about it. And so but he had talent. He turned that into a strength. That's what we can do also. I'm convinced, your approach, Zein, not many people have reached their potential, their full potential. There is so much more you can do, and it's so much more by emphasizing your strengths. Why I'm saying that is, in terms of culture, companies are more or less the same. If they emphasize their strengths culturally, as well as in terms of competencies, capabilities, they'll be in a much better place. I don't know. I can go on.
Question, because there's too much focus on feedback giving.
Yes.
And it's very easy to give feedback. Yeah, so the way I see feedback is like a two-way street, right? You give feedback and you take feedback. Do you have any experience in terms of like showing people how to learn how to take feedback? Because it's very easy to give feedback, you always know that you dropped on me in the way I am, but how should I approach this in terms of like, how should I take it, right? So maybe you can...
I train people to learn how to give feedback quite often, and I think it's not a one size fits all. I think some people take a lot longer to learn how to take feedback because either their past experiences at work made their walls go up really high, that they're just extra defensive regardless of the message that's actually being shared, whereas some people just have never learned healthy communication at work or otherwise. So I think it takes, you can try to do it in a group setting to teach people how to take feedback, but ultimately it's very much like a one-on-one.
Because you know the word of 2022, right? Which has been announced. The word of 2022.
What is it?
Gaslight.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's very easy when you're like actually receiving feedback. How do you know this feedback is actually objective?
It's you have to look at it all, like giving feedback and receiving feedback. So you can't train one without the other. And teaching people to look at it holistically and to teaching people that are giving the feedback to not attack the person, but instead the problem. And as Missak mentioned, give examples of the impact, as well as teaching people receiving feedback, how to give feedback too, because if they're in the shoes of someone giving feedback, they also are able to receive it better. But again, some people have bigger blocks to receiving feedback, so it's a complex one, but I think tackling holistic is the way to go.
And then do you think like part of teaching a person how to take feedback is also teaching them what proper feedback looks like?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of like know what to expect. So if you are in a position where you're receiving feedback in an unhealthy way, then you'll kind of know that's not the proper feedback that you should expect. Like, do you think that's also part of it?
It is part of it, yeah. Being able to identify that, and also to being able to remove yourself from the feedback being given, and to like assess what's being shared in front of you and to process it in a healthy way. I think it's helpful to being able to identify, is this going to help me? What can I take out of it? How can I use this in a positive way, or is this just completely unhelpful? And then through that, you're also able to respond to that person and ask them to maybe restate what they're saying, or ask them to elaborate, or ask them to rephrase what they're saying, whatever it is that's shared. But yeah, teaching people to be able to do that is really.
That's where trust is really.
I think not all feedback comes spoken. So verbal is one way, and the more that we're going to have communities around the world working together on one project, the more that you expect people from different cultures sharing with you feedback their own way. Like if I give you an idea right now and you don't like the idea, how can you show me with your body that you don't like it? Show me.
I don't like it.
No, without telling me. Like, how does your body, how can you move with your body that shows me that you don't like it? Can you do something? There you go. Cross your arms. Exactly. Move away. Say this, right? Whatever it is, that's feedback. And so I cannot control everyone's giving me feedback, but I also cannot control how people will take it. I don't know the baggage that they come with, their life, like their experiences. I don't know, and I cannot project my own. I come from a comfortable life, right? And that's other person maybe not very comfortable life. I cannot project my way on there and say, oh, I gave them the feedback properly, right? And I did. I learned how to do it, and I gave it properly, but they didn't take it. Trust is the basis. Like, you have to tackle that first. If there is no trust, I don't care how you tell me, I will not take it the right way. I will not, right? If there is no trust, if I don't trust you, or I don't trust the organization that I'm in, or the place that I'm in, that is your basic. So I would spend way more time at the beginning establishing trust. Question and answer time is up. So I would spend more time at the beginning establishing trust. And there's something that a really good tip that I learned early on, that people say, you know, in order to establish trust, after you establish trust, you'll be able to be vulnerable with others. And then the tip was absolutely the opposite. If you start with vulnerability, if you say at the beginning, I don't know, or I screwed up, or this didn't work, your trust level goes up immediately because you suddenly showed your true self. You are able to say and speak openly about the things that you don't know. And so you're not, you know, pretending. So other people say, okay, if this person is not pretending, then whatever they're telling me most probably will be true, because they're not just telling me to tell me. And in order for us to make sure that other people don't take the feedback personally, you can never be sure, but there is one way, one tip that worked with me, and hopefully it will work with everyone who tries it, is that I wouldn't tell the person that feedback. If my feedback is about a project, I would talk to the project in front of them, like, this is not working because of this. How can we fix it? And questions more than statements. How can this work? How can this? So I am attacking the project, the paper, the wall. And people suddenly, not only am I not looking at them, but I am actually giving feedback about the work in a way that they get the feedback, but they don't get the attack. And you will have to try so many different ways, not one way, in order for things to work, right?
And we haven't even started talking about the difference culture.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
we didn't plan for that.
Feedback. So feedback in certain cultures are acceptable. Actually, if you have worked in the Netherlands, you will know. I mean, you cannot be more direct, in principle. Okay, and actually, it is frowned upon if you're not direct. Having worked in Italy, having worked in France, having worked in England, I can tell you it's not the same thing. Having worked in the Middle East, it's another pair of guns. And that's where I think the individualization is happening more and more. You were talking about future, what's going to happen. I think there's much more, the trend is towards individualization. There's no denying. We are going to, yes, there's communities, we're building tribes, communities, but who makes them up? It's the individuals. So when we have to be able to respond much more to people's needs. And we haven't even started the whole subject of biases, right? That's another big area of needs to be tackled one way or the other. What we can do is make people aware that if I'm taking this decision, is it because of a past experience, yes or no? I mean, psychologists call that transference. If I meet somebody who's very close to somebody I've known in the past, if my experience with that person wasn't so great, what might happen in this relationship? And I'm just giving you now very quick. So let's be aware, especially when in relationships, I would say, and also in giving feedback. How we give feedback to a person will change to another person. Might that be because of a past experience I had with somebody else, or the way I have received feedback? Yeah, and so you see, I mean, this, the field is very, very large, to say the least.
So no, it's fine. So we want to go to block B. We want to talk about the creatives, about the freelancers, about getting that job, and then how do you deal with all these different cultures. So maybe I can start with a question that came from our conversation earlier. How do you,
Somebody raised
you have hands?
Yes, I have a question online.
Okay.
Just curious if folks feel that aggressive behaviors from management have reduced in the last, say, 4 years, since we have all become more aware of well-being, mental health, etc., in the UAE particularly.
I would say no.
No?
I've seen it. I've seen it in an organization where I had a gig, right? So I was a freelancer and I was working with a small group, and in front of me, the other group, the manager, she was insanely aggressive with her team that I couldn't focus on my work, and just started like jaw drop looking at her like, what is she saying and how is she saying? And this is like a very respectable organization. So I wouldn't say that people are less. It really depends on the people. It depends on who is coming, what is their mentality, where are they coming from, and how do they see themselves against others, like superior, like better, they know better, or so. So this comes to individuals and cultures and all that. Do you have any other, like, do you see them being less aggressive?
and it's in the latest Gallup survey that I have seen. They have done a worldwide survey, actually, especially after the pandemic, and mental health being now what COVID probably brought to the fore is that mental health is being taken more seriously in many different countries where it was not necessarily. That's true, but has it really changed the behavior of people? I don't think so, actually. I mean, you hear all these words of quiet resignation, and people are fed up of with COVID. We have discovered there's different ways of doing things. I mean, let's take some positives of the pandemic. We can do things in a different way. I think a lot of people have realized that, and they want to do things in a different way. So if companies now are not responding to that need, you're losing out in terms of attracting talent. I don't know how did we end up here.
Sorry, one last question about that. How would you structure that organization where everyone's on the same level and working with everyone? So who's giving feedback?
Well, I would hope that everybody is giving that to everybody.
But if you have to structure it, like for example, also in addition to the day-to-day, every 6 months, for example, then would you take a couple of people with?
What I've learned over time, and then I'll let my colleagues answer also, is that I think the most efficient and the best way to do it is to have as frequent as possible. It doesn't have to be long sessions. It can be a few minutes in the elevator, 2 or 3 minutes. It's fine. At least I know, okay, this was okay or wasn't okay. Yeah. And immediate, ideally, and that's why I think frequent feedback is rather helpful, and not once a year or once a month or once every 6 months for that. So that's definitely would be my humble advice, is to do it as frequently as possible. Probably you will want to have a more formal sessions here and there, maybe, but that depends very much on the culture that you're trying to create again. You know, that's, here we go again, I might say, but depending on what it is, what your objective is, what is feedback going to do for you? What is it that we're looking for? Why is it that you need feedback? What is it that is there something else that can provide you what you're looking for in terms of feedback? And it's just a question. So once you've decided on that, I think it will be easier for you to say, okay, let's do it this many times and let's do it in this way. What is the objective? I mean, yes, we have classic, there's some very clear thoughts about it, why feedback is going to help, how it can help, but it's really, I would say, helpful to decide what it's giving to you. I don't know if you are are you in HR or are you
I'm a lawyer, that's raising culture.
okay. So then, yeah, it's all kind of discussions. One last thing, many last things. Ask the people. That's another thing I've learned is, marketing does a fantastic job of asking the public and then the consumers, clients, what is it that they want? Right? We don't do that. Yes, you have satisfaction surveys, employee engagement surveys. Have we ever asked them what is important for them? Right? What is it that they're looking for when they come to the job? And it's really a bit more profound questions. I've worked with the hospital in the NHS in England. We have done that kind of surveys. It was different department to department, what the people were looking for. It depends how far you want to go.
Next book. So can I start with a question, and it feeds from our earlier conversation. If you are a creative freelancer or someone who's entering the gig economy, how do you balance between offering so many different options, like things that you can do, versus choosing just a few in order to show that you have this type of talent? Make sense?
Yeah, kind of. I was actually thinking about this yesterday, because on the side, I have a few different interests, and I always try to think, how can I tie them together? And something I was reading yesterday actually is you can have what makes you unique is your background plus the interests that you have plus the skills that you have plus what you want to do, and finding a way to tie it together, finding what that common string is. For me, it's working with people, whether it's through yoga or through coaching or whatever it is, it's working with people. So that's a string that ties a lot of different things that seem random together. And that way you can kind of package it under yourself or your brand or whatever that is that you want to do in terms of the services you want to deliver. And I found that quite helpful.
Do you have any questions rather than me asking the question? So you are in that freelance era, right? Like, do you have any question that you want to know? Okay, I'll let you think. I'll ask another question. So you are applying to different projects. How do you know that this project with this organization has a good working, like a good culture to work with? Right? How do you know what the warning signs or things that you need to pay attention to? Like we said, culture is very intangible, but then you can notice these things. What can you notice?
I think the first thing is acknowledging or knowing or telling yourself that this is very much you interviewing the company as much as it is them interviewing you, whether it's for a job or for a freelance. The reality is you're going to be spending a portion of your time with this company and with this team and with these people, and that's valuable because it's your time, it's your energy. So you're interviewing them as much as they are you. And culture, as you guys know, it's broad and there's many elements to it. So I think first asking yourself what matters to me in terms of the culture. What am I looking for? Because you'll find some companies have a very friendly, open, cool environment, but they're very strict on the times that they expect you in the office. They're fully in office and they're not chill about remote and they don't really take vacation, but when you're there, it's amazing and the energy is amazing. So it's about what matters to you. So I think before going into an interview or applying or wanting to work with a project, asking yourself what are your priorities at this moment in time, and that can change. So having a few that are your top and starting from there is what I'd say. And building questions around that and making sure that you take as much time as possible to ask the questions and to dig into things and pick up on signals or red flags or things that you're feeling in your gut that make you feel weird in terms of either the interview process or the people you're speaking to or them being disorganized or the way that they speak to you. There are so many signs and telling signs. So I think pick up on it and listen to your gut. But ultimately, it's about what matters to you the most at that moment.
Have you thought about what matters to you? One? Okay. So you have an idea what you're looking for. And the rest, you're still thinking? You're still in the process? Yes, sort of. Okay. Good.
Well, my advice would be think about your strengths.
Yes.
And there's quite a bit of tests actually you can take.
Absolutely.
I'm not trying to sell my trade. It's just it's about $50. It's called Gallup Clifton Strengths. I find it a fantastic tool. In fact, it will give you a range of 34 themes, and it will give you like the top 10 or top 10, top 12 are the ones that you want to work with, actually. You see, there's 34 of them, and if you know that, that's what I'm emphasizing this, you'll be in a much stronger position to go and say, this is what I can bring to you guys. This is what my force is. This is my strengths, and you're speaking then from a total different position, actually. That's what I find. It's the philosophy behind it that I find much more interesting than the tool itself, if I can call it that. But the tool does help. I'm working with somebody right now who's in a midlife crisis. We're looking at the strengths. What is it that I can emphasize? Where is it that I want to go? Where do I want to move? That's and it doesn't have to be midlife crisis or crisis in general, I would say, but it does help. Huh? It's thank you. Nice word, enlightenment. It gives you perspective in a total different way. Since we are children, we have been told when you received your report, what happened? Your parents, I did it too. It's not so great here. Whereas actually 10 subjects were so great, and what do I do? I focus on the 2 or 3 that are not so great, right? And that continues in life. That's the unfortunate thing, and I'm not doing it anymore. So I've learned my lesson. So that's you can please do that. You see how it can help you, hopefully.
I did take the Gallup test. I really liked it, but I actually learned a lot when I've had a facilitator explain it to me because they were able to connect this. So it's not just, oh, these are your top 5 or 10. It's like, oh, this is why you do this, and this is why you do that, and this is why this type of organizations work for you, and this type does not work. It becomes a preference, right? You need to look for an organization that gives you this feeling because of your strength, right? So it helps a lot. There are, so I love Galp, and there is another one, also just to give you options, there is another one called Foresight. Foresight thinking preferences helps you understand when you're solving a problem, where does your creativity, like where is it highest? Where does your energy really go up? And then where, when you are solving the problem, your energy is very low. So it helps you understand in a project phase, where do you excel? If you can, you choose the phase where you're really good at. So yeah, so I love this, assessing yourself, figuring, and I'm sure you have a lot of those examples, like how do people really understand themselves? There's one tip that I did one time by coincidence with my students, and it worked so well that I did it for myself. At the end of a class, tell me if we did it with your class or not with yours. At the end of the class, what we did is that I asked every student to write one thank you note or something that is very unique about each one. So we did it in a round, like, so okay, so now on the side, okay, write one sentence, something that you're grateful for, or something that you thank him for, or something that he did that's very special to you. And so everyone wrote Missak this like one, and then suddenly you have like 25 of thank yous, different types of thank yous. No names, it's anonymous, right? And so we did it for everyone. And 10 years later, I had a student show me back pictures like I could not throw these, because whenever I fell down, I pulled them back up again, and those were what helped me move through the hard time. Because I remembered all the good things that I did at that time, and everyone noticed. And so I started to do it in my project. Anyone who sends me like, oh, thank you, this is great, this is impressive, I save it. I save it for my, feel better moments. Because you will have so many feel down moments, and you need something that's ready to pick you up, because as a freelancer, no one else will pick you up. You need to pick yourself up. Any questions?
I have a question.
Please.
But probably not related to this, but to values.
Okay.
So this is an observation that Dubai is a city which is like more of a, you have a transient nature, like people come and go, nobody stays there permanently if they are not a local. So in that sense, I myself am from India, I'm disconnected from my land, I'm disconnected from my family. And we always had this family unit or a community unit which shared a common set of values which bound us together. And when we move to an organization, we are looking for a set of values. So even when you're talking about trust, and these are basic things, or maybe cleaning up after you mess up. But these are values which comes from your family, but we are missing it. And as we move towards individualization, we are moving away from these values. So in that sense, don't you think it's important to set like a mandate for culture? Just like for sustainability, we have certain things in place now. So organization chooses to be sustainable. So they go through processes to be, to embrace it as part of their mission. Or well-being. I'm a workplace designer. Post-pandemic, I've seen a great increase in like the requirements for a space that's about well-being. So that is a mandatory, like we have the well certification. So similarly, shouldn't we have something which is like not boiling down to an individual? Like let's say I'm going to start a company tomorrow, but I need to have a basic set of values in place, which is about truth, honesty, or helping somebody, so that we don't have to enforce people to. So it's all tied down to a value. Like, don't you think that values is really important for a bigger organization to have a healthy work environment? Should be like vision is there, but you also need values, I suppose. Yeah. Because we as a culture probably don't have it.
So technically they do. They write it down. It's framed somewhere. But I think the one that you're talking about is the one that you need to sit with your group and create that. And so you agree on it. That's the conversation, not only how we want the feedback, but also what values are we living by every day? What do we agree on? Because maybe what you think is important, I might not have it as a top priority. There might be something else. So absolutely, you have to, like what Missak said, it's the culture by design, not by default. So you're not coming and just suddenly there is nothing. There is there, but you have to agree. Do we agree that this is the value that we're actually going to work with? I'll give it back.
You'll find in a lot of companies today, one of the first things they'll do before even hiring a team is creating their values, because it's just like how to start a company 101. The question is like, how much do they stick to it? How much do they stand by it? How ingrained is it? And are they able to retain those values as they grow and as they hire people? And are they hiring the right people that are attracted to those values? Vice versa. So I think it is very important to have values in a company and to set those early on. They don't always stick. A lot of the time, the true values, which is actually how people act and treat each other and interpret things and behave in a company, or what they hold as like, important, isn't what is written down. But sometimes it is. So it's just about setting it, looking at it, reiterating on it, and ensuring you hire the right people that actually hold those values as valuable or as like dear to them. And you can test for values as you're interviewing people. It depends on how much they really matter as you grow, and it might be that as you grow you have to reiterate on your values and actually say this isn't one of our core values. And I think keeping it 3 to 4 is realistic, because it really can get lost and diluted as you grow and as you change.
Just when you mentioned in the interview, someone told me something amazing. It's like in an interview, one of the questions should always be, so you're the interviewer, right? What makes you angry, right? Because that shows one of your values. What is the one thing that makes you angry? And if people started to say, oh, there should or should not, just by starting with that, you immediately X this person, because should comes from, this is my way, this is the right way, and everyone should do that. So that's an immediate like value that you don't agree with. And then whatever their answer is, whether it is, what makes me angry is people, not being on time or not letting me finish or whatever it is, or taking credit, then that shows you, like, are you able to work with this or not?
I think there's a fine line between how much you can impose and how much there is that is living in the company. As I said, so whatever culture, if it has not been designed, something is living there. There's a certain way of behaving, a certain way of doing things. So yes, I've done many different projects, values implementation projects, and I can tell you what did not really work that well, and my hands up, is when it was imposed from the top. The CEO decides, or the management team says, okay, let's have integrity, results orientation, customer orientation, and innovation. Okay? Without considering really what is already living there, what is happening today. Because they want, this is what we want from now on. They mean it well, let's be honest. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not really the best way to do that. I think you have to consider what is there today, what is living, what is happening or not happening that you would like to see happening. Okay, and rather do it not in an imposing way, but to let it emerge more of the common themes that are being lived today. and then to have open discussions about it, rather than, as I said, to impose it. So there's different ways that can be thought about how to go about it. That's what I'm getting at, I suppose. And it's not, and to complicate things even further, I would say there is no one rule to do it all over the place, depending on the size of the company, depending on the cultural mixes of the company. You probably would do it totally different, I would say, in a French company with only French employees, which is rare, becoming rare nowadays, but it can happen. Then if you are dealing in a company with 20, 25, or 30 different nationalities. And depending on also where they are, what type of field they are in, all that really plays a role.
So, yes. Okay, so we're coming to a close. I mean, we're here to answer questions, but I'm aware of time. If you need to leave, we understand. But if you have more questions,
is there anything burning?
There is burning.
How much time do we have? Let's ask the coach.
Yes.
And let's assume that this person or the person is
You're dealing with a toxic person.
I'm not necessarily dealing with a toxic person, but
Are you the top?
all
It's not you, we know it's.
So let's say it's a flat team, right? Like it's a flat administrative department, and I mean there are senior people, there are directors, but everyone, I'd say that's a healthy way to communicate with others. But then there's a toxic person within this healthy environment, and they don't necessarily have power, but sometimes
The energy.
yeah, it sucks the energy exactly. Although everyone else is happy.
Yeah.
And yeah, how would you deal with that?
It's very much a case by case situation. I think asking first what is this person doing to be toxic. So there's many, like, toxic is very general. What does that actually mean? Like, what is this person doing? So starting there. Second, and what is the impact of their behavior on others, on the team, on the organization, on people around them? Of course, it is very energy draining for people around them, and I do think in a company, especially in a smaller one, one bad apple spoils the bunch in a way. So, cool. But what is really at the root of their behavior? So that is a question I'd ask myself before going into it, is what is at the root of their behavior? If I'm able to ask them that and understand that deeper, and then I would deal with it that way, because each one is different. It could be that there is immense pressure on this person and expectations that they're unable to fulfill in their role, and they're working till 2 a.m. every day, and they're just burnt out, and it's leaking onto others. It could be that they just don't like their job. It could be that they hate their team. It could be so many things, and I would really get to the root of it and try to understand it before trying to solve it. The solution could be that this person shouldn't be on the team anymore, but it also could be that the person's role needs to be rescoped, or maybe they're in the wrong role. It could be so many things. So we can chat after if you have my specific. It can be, you know.
Could be they're not aware of that, or they are. Okay, if they are.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
But
So
they are aware. I mean, personally, that's how they do. That's how that person treats with others.
yeah.
No,
they're not aware of the impact. So
Uh,
maybe the feedback would be the way you do this like this is the effect of it, and this is how you make. Oh, sorry. This is how you whatever you're doing. This is how it's affecting me, or it's affecting someone else. So feedback could be one. There is not one thing, but the feedback is only one. Another one could be you rebooting, like you saying, okay, let's start, and you cancel it because you cannot fix people who don't want to be fixed. And so just like focus on how just to keep whatever you need to keep, and then this person is going to be this person. You cannot change that. So that could be one. I'll definitely want to find out what's wrong with them, right? So if they are able to answer, right? If they're able to respond and say, or if you're able to find out, that's really helpful. But if not, there are so many different ways that you can try it. At the end, if you couldn't, just, you focus on, okay, I'm not going to let this person affect me or affect my mentality. And it's not easy. We always do.
It doesn't actually necessarily affect them. Nothing gets
someone else,
but it affects someone else.
Yeah. So it's will.
What I've learned over the years is, for example, 20 years ago, I would have sold that totally different from what I would sold it like today. And there are cases Randah mentioned. It's worthwhile investing in terms of developing or bringing aware, etc., etc. There are other cases where I would say there's no other solution. But very radical solution, that's it. It's very difficult, there's sometimes some sort of threshold. Once you cross that, it's you're really wasting your time. That's I'm talking now with experience, let's say, that I've had, okay? And we mean it all well in general. All companies mean it well, I'm almost sure of that, although you wonder sometimes. But in the end, I've also come to realization that actually it's not helping, because the impact that one person might have on the rest of the organization can be huge, actually. And that's what you have to care about. If you look at it from a perspective of the company or the employer, let's say, or whoever the manager is, etc. There comes a time where the impact is so huge that there's not a solution.
I ask you, like, the ads from Apple on Steve Jobs, here's 3 crazy ones. Misfits, the rebels. Yeah. It's very cool ad. They're featuring very different types of people. What if sometimes we see people as toxic, they're just different as we are, and we are the group, right? We are the minority culture, and so we are actually excluding somebody who do not understand.
Yes.
Always.
No, it's a good point. I have to say, I think it's a very valid point, and that's why I would like to give people a chance, in general, right? And it's not like first behavior that contravenes my ways of looking at things, right? That I would take an action. If I would, then I would do much more. You can do coaching, you can do developing, you can do different things. But there comes a time where you say,
because I lived in Singapore for 8 years. Yeah. There were many times when I was just one white person on the entire team. Right. So I know what it feels like to actually, to cultures and to power distance, to board and all those things. So you might be seen as a rebellious child from the West or to very well paid Singaporean society. So it's very relative.
And the creative ones are the hardest to manage, by the way. Yeah. There's like a whole school of like how to manage the creatives within our organization, because they don't fit, right? And so you don't want to lose them. But again, we're talking about people who are affecting others in a bad way, right? So, and again, it could be that they don't know that it's their way of speaking or behaving, or their, they could be, I don't know, in Arabic we say diffish, like they're just like throw things, but they're being direct. and they don't think that they are rude.
You mentioned awareness.
It is awareness. Yeah.
Awareness, that's where it starts.
Yeah, so they have to know that they are affecting someone in a bad way. Now, if they continue knowing that, then they are toxic. And then whatever you need to deal with it is that. But if they are trying to change because they didn't mean that, then we're talking about being alienated because they just don't fit for whatever reason. Do you have any question, Hadil, online? We're good? We're good. Thank you. Thank you so much for staying with us.
Thank
We
you.
hope we really answered some of your questions and some of your unasked questions.
Yeah.
We got into your head. Thank you, Missak. Thank you, Zein, so much. And thank you.
Thank you.